with some elliptical running.
Hello.
We are live.
Oh, we're live. We're
We're live.
here.
Just in time for people to see my lovely assistant. Woof. Okay, well, we are here to talk about the Psychic Vampire Codex, and I am here with the lovely, the thirsty, the fantastic Jack Townson.
Oh my, what an introduction. Thank you. That has now made my entire week.
I mean, really, if we can't puff one another up, like, it just, there's too many people in too many communities, like, their job is like, oh, you're competing with me, I'm just going to tear you down. And that's not the way to do it. That's not the way to do it.
That's so, I don't understand how we can all see each other as competing. I honestly feel like everything, we can all shake hands and all exist. I feel like, I don't understand that personally. You know, I think everyone can just exist and, you know, kind of come together in a way, in my opinion.
Okay, so, wow. Tonight we're going to talk about the re-release of the Psychic Vampire Codex. And that's kind of a big deal for me. That would be, this is what the new book, just not with the little strippy-doo, because that's our galley copy for editing. But look at that lovely ankh that Abri made, and all of the, like, it's got the throwback to the old classic Wiser edition, but otherwise lots of updates.
It's gorgeous.
The other thing I brought, just because you didn't get a chance to see it because you couldn't make it out because of that storm.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
This is the original.
Wow.
So this is the handwritten original from '94. And, you know, just as an idea, I was 21 when everybody else is getting shit-faced in college. I'm writing this. But yeah, back when it was the Codex Vampiricus, which honestly just shows that I was a religious studies major, because that is all back to a Bible. There's a couple of texts of the Bible, the Codex Sinaiticus and the Codex Leningradensis, and Codex is the word for a certain type of manuscript. And if you're familiar with this work, it's not in standard chapters. It's like these little, like, focused points of, like, a thing on dream walking, a thing on deep feeding, a thing on, and just, it says exactly what it needs to on that topic and then moves on. Wow. And feasibly, you could just kind of, like, it's been in a different order in multiple different publications based on, like, kind of where it fits. It's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle for some of the topics. So this book has been out in various versions since '94. I was part of the zine culture back then. So it was, you know, back when you would, like, sit on, well, at least we would sit on our dorm room floors and literally cut and paste things and, like, go and, like, Xerox them off and saddle staple them and send them off to friends. And I had the International Society of Vampires back then, and Shadow Dance, and the Codex in pieces was circulated that way. And then there were a couple of other versions of it published before the Wiser one in 2004. Yeah. And I think the one that got the widest circulation from those was, good Lord, was this, I'm going to say 96 or so, an AOL homepage.
Wow.
To give you, I published it to an AOL homepage, and it became a thing that was circulated on the internet on different message boards. Bits of it cropped up on IRC and whatnot. So it's sort of existed everywhere. That online version you can still find, and I will apologize ahead of time because the language is dated. You know, this is a thing that's, 30 years old next year. So some of the language is dated. And you could, if you went to Sacred-Texts, the founder of that site approached me in, when he was founding it, so like late 90s, early 2000s, and asked for permission to basically, would I donate a copy of this to his occult section, because he found it to be such a foundational, influential text.
Oh, so, absolutely.
All of that aside, what's your experience like? Like this is sort of one of the reasons why we've crossed paths. So
yeah,
spill the tea. Like, I don't want to just, like, have you puff me up or anything. Like, I'm just curious about your journey, because this book is older than some of the people in the chat, I'm sure, at this point.
It's wild to think about.
Mm-hmm.
First, I'm always going to puff you up. That's That's just what I'm going to do always. Yes, absolutely. Come on. Absolutely glorious. But no, this book is in my opinion, it's just fact in my mind, is the most influential book in the vampire community for learning about all of this. It's so amazing because the way that I actually found your teachings was actually when I needed it most. I don't think we've ever talked about this, but and some people don't even know this story. But, so I was I guess Ronin, and I knew I was a vampire. I was 7 years old, and very few people knew. Very few people. And over time, those people kind of fluttered in and out of my life. And when I was actually in fresh tea. When I was in high school, I actually got sent to boarding school. And it was not my choice, not my decision. So I was forced to go to boarding school, and I had a really hard time because I was also kind of struggling with figuring out what this was. I like knew of some things out there, but I didn't really know any other vampires. I didn't know what was legitimate, what was valid. I was lost, completely lost. And then I was very, very lucky, very fortunate to have this school assign me a laptop. And of course, as any high school kid, instead of doing, work, the first thing you're going to do is go and be like, oh, I have the internet. I can get on. I can actually go and search and look things up. And
Google.
Google immediately. Yes. It's really, it's fascinating because the way they found it was just looking and jumping through web page to web page to web page. And at first, I wasn't just looking for, am I a vampire? At first, I was just looking at anything vampires. Is there anything out there that is legitimate? Is there anything out there that's something that can help me? And through that, I actually found your teachings. And at the time, it was like the heavens opened. Everything kind of made sense immediately. All of these experiences, all of these things made sense. And we have never spoken. We have, it's a wild thing to read someone else's experiences, someone else's teachings, and to never have talked to them and go, oh my gosh, we have similar situations. Like, this is something that I go through, and I've never talked to this person in my life.
Yeah, that validation is really big. I mean, so for me, like lots of like little early awakenings and like no structure at all. Like the best I found in 91 was Dion Fortune's book Psychic Self-Defense, and it was the first place I encountered the word psychic vampire. Hot on the heels of astral vampire, which is more like this sort of like disembodied thing that like lays over you. It was totally like the Mara incubus sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's a psychic self-defense book. So Fortune does not see vampires as a good thing at all. And the difficulty for me was like reading it going, but she's describing like, I check these boxes, but I don't do these other things. Like, I was already pretty well on my way to like try to make sure I was getting permission. Admittedly, in like middle school, not always. Like, I would be like, hey, I'm going to give you a back rub. Is that okay? Like, maybe you'll feel really relaxed afterwards. Is that okay? Like, as best as I could get people without being like, let me just explode your brain a little bit and be like, hey, I think maybe I'm a vampire and I'm going to just eat your energy now. It's okay, cool. But I mean, this book came about because I got so frustrated and frankly angry that there wasn't anything. And I'm in college like right as the internet starts to be a thing. So we're like right at this weird cusp where we're still mostly communicating with snail mail, which is why the zine culture was so important. Because Shadow Dance, my magazine back then, was just gothic literary. Okay, so Real Talk was Anne Rice had cornered the market on vampires, and if you were an aspiring writer, as I was, and you were sending things off, you learned really quickly nobody wanted vampires. No more vampires. The end. Just stop. So we all got frustrated. Like, we were into it. Everybody wanted to write stuff about it. We didn't have an outlet, so there was a whole like very vibrant vampire gothic, and it's a little bit of fan fiction, it's a little bit of poetry, and it's what we see on things like your Discord, where people are just allowing their creativity to flow with something that really speaks to them.
Yeah.
And then behind the scenes, because there's those times where you read somebody something and it's fiction, but you're also like, that's real familiar. I wrote some, and then you write a private message, or you write them a letter. You're like, hey, where'd that idea come from? So we start all corresponding, and we're like, oh, you're just writing about this because you don't know where else to put it. Got it. Me too. So we started. That's sort of where the vampire community came from. Is we're like, okay, so you're role playing, but mostly because you have no other outlet for this, and at least this gives you a place where you can try on your authentic self.
Yeah.
Same thing for the zine culture. And this whole time I'm like having little salons, like little gatherings at my my apartment first, my house I grew up in Hinckley, which hasn't been razed to the ground yet, which is astounding. So bad things there. Not my fault. But just getting people together in real time to create a safe space where we could be like, okay, no judgment. What do you experience? What is this like for you? And through that dialogue, being like, just me taking notes, we would sit and do energy work and just, run experiments with and on one another, and just go, okay, so how does this work though? Like, and that's where this comes from, is those notes, the experiments, dialogue with other people, and a lot of soul searching, a lot of like, if a book existed that would have helped me, what would it look like? And there's the Codex.
Wow. And that's incredible. And your book has helped so many people, including me. But hearing how it came to be, I mean, that makes so much sense that, there would be role players that are just kind of putting that on, like wearing that so that way they can be themselves without. And I did the same thing.
I was gonna say it's pretty much so many people did that though. Like you feel this thing and it's in you, and it doesn't really have a good comfortable word. It doesn't have a place it can fit in the like normal box that's been built around you in your life. And like the only places you have for an outlet are fiction and fantasy and stories and art. And in some ways those are more real. Like those are ways that we can tell truths, ways that we can embody truths. So there are some folks in the vampire community who just try to sweep under the rug how entwined role play and art and music and all of it was, and fashion, and the fact that lots of us are still goths.
Yeah.
But I mean, why? Because it's through art and it's through that stuff that through myth making, we are often able to express deeper truths about ourselves because we have permission to move beyond the bounds.
Yeah. Exactly. And there's no fear of judgment, because if anyone ever looks at you, you're like, it's an act. I'm acting. I'm doing this and that. And I mean, I relate. It's so funny because I relate so much, because that's how one of the ways I actually started my web series, and how I actually started doing my acting on TikTok in the first place. And that's how I started kind of putting kind of things out there to see people's reactions and how they would kind of react to this in the first place. So it's amazing to hear that there's such a similar experience that we all kind of have.
Same process, different platforms. Like truth wants to be free. Like it really does. Well, and like
nothing you can do. Yeah,
the process of finding like the language. So the beacon is something that like at this point is so much a part of the vampire culture that I think most people don't realize. Like I coined that term, like that did not exist. And here's why I coined it, is we were calling that the Highlander effect.
Really?
And multiple people had, like, again, pop culture touchstones. Enough of us had been like, you'd walk into a room and, busy place, whether it's an SCA like thing and there's a whole bunch of Ren Fair people, or it's a goth club. And there's like that one person where you're like, I need to talk to you, which means I also have to get over my crippling social anxiety crap. which I'm way on the other side of, but very shy, introverted, like mousy thing. Like try to imagine that.
Yeah.
With all of this personality crammed in that, just that awkward is a nice word for it. But like we would like that was the Highlander effect, because if you've ever seen that movie, like they would just like and like all the immortals know one another, and then like a sword fight would break out.
Born to be kings. Yeah. Spot on.
But obviously I can't call it the Highlander effect in a book that I want to publish. So I'm like,
exactly.
What is it? It's like walking into a room and there's a beacon. Like the person is just like they're like a lighthouse. There's just something shining off of them. Stephen King already had The Shining also, so like we're just like, okay, beacon. It seems fine. Awakening, I stole both from the Buddhists and from Dune. No lie.
Hey,
again, the pop culture is a language. Like it's our modern myth. Like I really want to encourage people not to feel shy for being inspired by it.
I mean, that's how it works throughout time. There's so many things that are myth that with somebody sitting there trying to make sense, trying to
look, vampire fiction. Look, the vampire Jack Townson name has its price. Talking about art, fiction, myth making, working through our personal stuff by putting it in a story. I hear that you've got something like that going on.
I just might. I mean, yeah, the book, my novel is up for pre-order right now as well. It'll be up available January 23rd. But it's so funny, just like really briefly, it's amazing how that story came to be, because so much of it is like Shane and I joke about it all the time. There are so many things that are very much beat for beat my life that are just a twisted mirror, that are just kind of like little twisted things here and there. And it's like, it blends so much reality and fiction. And it's this like went from being like very much at first, like one of my outlets and being like one of my ways of kind of showing my story, to kind of watching these things back and going, oh my gosh. Because other people were telling me like, this is your life. You're telling the story of your life. You're not even realizing it. And I'm like, no, I'm not. That's not happening. What are you talking? It's a story. And I watch these things back and I'm like, oh my God.
Like characters are all like bits of yourself or memories of previous selves, or that's one of the things. So reincarnation plays a pretty big role in my particular experience with vampirism. Because of course, it's like an early teen. I'm like, I'm not undead, but I'm pretty sure vampire is the right word. But I'm not undead. What the heck? But I'd had past life memories that were verifiable since I was very, very tiny. Like my mom, I was my mom's favorite like party favor. She was a hippie art student at Kent State and also a violinist. And I would talk about previous lives. A lot of kids grow out of it, so it's not uncommon for a 2 or 3-year-old to just be like, my last life when I was doing but I would just like natter on about things to a degree that was apparently both scary and entertaining. And my mom kept a lot of like things that I would draw. At one point, the one that really strikes me was I would draw this woman over and over and over again. She's walking on a beach. She's got a very specific dress and her hair piled up on her head and these earrings. And I fixated on the details. My mom was sure that I was the woman, but my perspective was always like following about 10 paces behind her on this beach. And I drew it often enough that I remember adults being like, what is this? And I'm like, it's before the waters came.
Wow.
Like it's right before we died. Like something terrible. My mom, again, art student, ended up in a class where they were studying art history. And I remember her grabbing her notes and being like, wait. And she takes one of the little things that I was drawing at like 3.5 or 4. And again, it's rough, but like I would be really specific with these earrings and the way they were Minoan. They were from Minoan Crete. Like they matched a specific style on that island, which at one point their civilization got pretty wrecked by a tsunami from a volcanic eruption in the Mediterranean. And I'm like, yeah, that tracks. My grandma, on the other hand, was like, oh, you're from Hawaii. And I'm like, pretty sure no.
That's wild. That's incredible.
So reincarnation's a big deal for me. And you and your stories, you are not the first. I'm sure you will not be the last. I know so many people where the first places who we really are can come out is where we just let ourselves tell a tale, like without judgment, without boundaries, without worrying about like, am I crazy? Like, am I delusional? You just put it where it needs to be. Like you're processing it.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating to me. I'm not someone who commits to belief in things 100%. Like you'll hear me be like, oh, I'm 99% sure. That's about as certain as I get. But it's been fascinating to me to just, through this book and the way it's connected me to people over the years, and finding the people like deeply resonate with the mythic story in there, like the like sort of Keprian history of like there's this old age of temples and whatnot. That for some people is a huge turnoff. Like they're just like, nope, that's not my thing. And I'm like, yeah, you probably don't have anything to do with it. You can probably still use the energy work anyway. Cool. That's why it says seek your own truth.
Yeah.
But then like having them be like, hey, I wrote this thing 10 years ago, and they'd like pull it out. And I'm like, oh, I wrote about that thing. Look, and this person over here, they drew it. And we can just like all put it on the table and be like, so if this is, 100% factually true or not, at least we can say we're pointing at the same thing. Like something's there, something is shared. And that's profound.
Yeah, it is. That's honestly, that is enough validation to have that be a fact and a truth, at least in yourself. At that point, nobody else needs to tell you that that's anything. That's enough for you. That is.
Yeah.
So, and also like your book, no matter anyone's viewpoint, is incredible. Absolutely incredible.
This is a good question. Alexandra Rivera asked, do certain things in vampire spirituality have any similarities in witch culture or any of the occult? And the answer broadly is yes. There's actually a lot of crossover and like intertwining. So within the vampire community, some people take it in a spirituality direction where it informs the way in which they practice magic and the way in which they practice ritual. For my system, it absolutely is a linchpin to the way we set up ritual, the way we practice magic. It all ties into the way we interface with energy. And that's a core thing for us. I think it's important to say that within the vampire culture, that is not true for everyone. Everybody has a different way of embodying this, a different way of bringing it into their lives. Some people are just vampire soccer moms and like they're vampiric, but they don't have to like the goth trappings. Nobody wears fangs. Like it's just not their thing. Some of us really like to play with the glamour and kind of like hook into that archetype and the stories and the sort of the energy that's behind that. Within House Kepru, we do celebrate a Wheel of the Year. It's a little different from what you would see if you like went to like the classic Wiccan Wheel of the Year. And that's totally because I designed that system. I sat back and I was like, what rituals speak to us? Because I'd been to enough Wiccan and pagan circles and things. And, I got to say, as somebody who grows up in a culture where we're not really agrarian anymore, celebrating like 3 different harvest festivals that don't have any meaning or context was just like, okay, so we're burning the Wicker Man okay, and then this one's also, it's fun. Let's dance the spiral. It's cool to hang out with friends, but it wasn't speaking to me like on a spiritual level. So I wrote something that did. Like that is my personal take on like ritual and spirituality. If it does not speak to you directly, then you need to find something else or make it yourself.
Yeah. That it just makes sense. That's honestly how a lot of these things started in the first place. It's just true. And I say it on my lives all the time. Like, if this doesn't speak to you, you have to find it yourself. You have to find what makes sense. You do. Yeah, spot on.
Yeah, I had a leg up. I've got a degree in comparative religious studies with a concentration in psychology of religion. I studied under Jesuits. I learned demonology from Jesuits. That was fun. Like classic, actual all of it. And, I got to read, sacred texts from all over. I would say the one place in which we were tremendously lacking was Islam, for whatever reason. Like, this is before all of the other stuff. But, Hinduism and Buddhism and Jainism, a lot of indigenous stuff, and just like looking at all the different practices in the world. And I'm not going to say that they're not all the same thing. I'm not going to make the mistake of like, old stuffy 19th century Victorian men who are like, oh yes, actually Dionysus is really just Jesus Christ, and like, let me be James Frazier and just make everything Christ. It's not that simple. But I will say that when people have a genuine experience where they connect to something mystical, something deeper, something real, there is a commonality in how that feels and how that changes you. And then each of us take it and put it through a different lens, as we should, because every one of us have a different experience.
Yeah. And I'm just blown away. I'm sorry. I'm just blown away. Every time, I'm sorry. Totally informal. Every time you speak, I just sit here and I go.
I would have been a professor, but honestly, I probably would have talked about the like kinky sex lives of people way too much. I would have gotten fired very early. A question from Strum and Ronan is, will the re-release of the Psychic Vampire Codex be available on Amazon later on? They're in the UK. Postage is prohibitive. Yes, it is. Holy moly. Okay, so real talk. If you want it signed from me, you can order it off my site, and that's nice and that's fine, but postage is ridiculous. Like, it would be cheaper for me to send something to Canada, to just like take a ferry across Lake Erie and just deliver it to you myself. Like, it's nuts. It is not acceptable how much they are charging for postage. So yes, this will be available on Amazon. You'll be able to pick it up from wherever, whatever. If money is tight, please don't pay like twice what the book is worth just to have it shipped overseas to you. Like, I do that. Like, my favorite store is Treadwell's in London. They have some fantastic stuff. And I always have that moment of like, is it actually going to make it though? Like, is it going to make it? Are we going to have another thing stuck in the Suez Canal and like just everything goes ass over tea kettle? So yes, Amazon, yes, everywhere you can get books. I'm contemplating an audiobook version, but that will be a little ways down the road. Starting to play around with Audible and things like that. But that is a future project. I think it's also important to say that, so technically the 30th anniversary of this book is next year. And this is an updated version, but it's not like completely rewritten. There's a lot of reasons for that. One, to like completely rewrite it feels like I would really mess up the text. This is actually like my most magical working, like my most intentional sit down, like weave magic into every word and the rhythm of it and the word choice and just the way in which things were structured. And one of the spells put in this book is anybody who picks it up who needs it, hopefully, like the magic is for them to open to the sections that they need to read. Hilariously, I actually also worked into it. I want this book to jump out at people who need it. This is where I learned that magic is sometimes literal to a point that is hilarious, because the number of people who wrote to me when this was out on the shelves and released, where the book literally fell on their heads off of a shelf, was just silly. Like, if it was one, if it was five, but people were like, you're not going to believe this. I'm like, oh, just try me. But I was at my bookstore. I'm not even into vampires, but your book fell in my head and it like opened to this page and it just said things to me. And I'm like, you and about 15 other people at this point. That's interesting. Magic is real.
It's absolutely real. Absolutely. And that's incredible. You're like, once again, just saying it, your book has helped so many people. It's helped me. And it's just so many of us, like, not to keep puffing, like so many of us would be so lost without your works and so confused. It's just true. I've read a lot. I have taken time to research as much as I can, and I will once again say Psychic Vampire Codex is the one that immediately jumped out to me and was the one I could digest, because I definitely struggle. So when I read
it's written to be like short bursts, like the little bit that you can like you can read this section, you can move on, you can flip around through it, like you can read it backwards, like you don't have to read it in a linear sense. I did not want to overwhelm people.
Yeah.
And also of all of my books, it's the one that's like published on a wide level that I allowed myself to indulge in kind of my authentic inner voice, which I apologize only slightly is a little bit bombastic. I am an old school goth, and there is a somewhat, I don't want to say pompous, but like there is a didactic quality to some of it. We've smoothed over some of the edges. If you go to the sacred text one, like it is very much like, I am the goth daddy declaring to you what vampirism is like. And there's a certain sort of high speech that you will find in certain occult books, even now. And, you know, I try to like find a middle ground with that, because sometimes that can be off-putting, but also just like being like direct and blunt. Like, I'm not going to explain to you why this is important. Here's just how it works.
I think honestly, when I've read it, I never actually, I never got that. I never got like,
good.
Like I never did. It read very, very much the way that I needed it to read, where it was very, the best word I could say for it is very academic, very like, here's what this is, here's the things that you need to know, and more. And honestly, I struggle to learn. I will 100% say I have no problem saying I've severe ADHD. Oh my God, a bird. So it can be a little difficult, but especially when I read your book, it was, I flew through it, read it again, and looking forward to reading it another time as well, because it reads so, like, it reads perfectly. It really does. Like, I know I'm just blowing so much air, but it's true, and you deserve to know it.
A lot of work went into like trying to make it the most accessible thing it could be. I will say, like, Wiccans were the ones who were like, this is a little bit, I don't know, dark, and I'm like,
oh,
okay, but you want dark, you should see some of my private writing, but okay. Also, like, the one thing that got like, there were a couple of things that just never made it to the book that are written. One of which is probably really, sometimes you write stuff that's mostly for you, but it was like a 5-page dissertation of just sort of like the flavor of energy as you're like feeding off of people, like what they've been through. And it's very like, if you are really vampiric, this will be an appealing sort of thing to you, but it's sort of like, I don't know, if Hannibal Lecter was like writing the guide to feeding.
Oh, I'm for it. That sounds great.
Yeah, that's in the like maybe somewhere else pile. The other thing, what changes can we expect in the re-release? That's important. So the Wiser edition. Okay. So this is a book that has been around for 30 years, and has had an influence on a lot of people. Like, if you find other books and other things that have been written, groups that have been formed since that time, if they are not being directly inspired by it, it's clear that they read it, disliked something about it pretty significantly, and felt the need to actually like argue against it, and like kind of be like, nope, we don't do it that way. In the way that a lot of pagans would be like, we're not Christians or we're not Satanists, and they sort of unintentionally like work some of that stuff into their stuff nevertheless. So the first thing is, we went through and we updated pronoun usage and made things a little bit less like all counselors are female and all warriors are male. And some of that was the editors. They did not like they them pronouns in 2004, let me tell you.
Oh, wow.
They did not like, he or she. Like, I tried a bunch of different ways to be like, this isn't about like counselors are all girls. Like, I'm trying to like present the idea that this is, we associate these qualities with feminine in our culture, but it's not about gender. It's more about like something that is a little bit more flow,
Yeah.
as opposed to a warrior that is something a little bit more solid. And those things don't translate easily, and everybody's especially hot on the heels of the whole Wiccan thing, with witchcraft in the 90s, in the 80s, but witchcraft in the 90s was aggressively binary, god and goddess, lord and lady.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons that I was turned off by it, because I'm intersex. I don't fit in either of those.
Mhm.
Like, it doesn't take much to see. And I would go to these rituals, and they'd be like, be in touch with your inner goddess. And I'm standing there being like, what? That's okay. Hope nobody. Yep. Awkward.
Oh no. Oh no.
But one of the purposes with like warrior, priest, and counselor, which are these sort of three broad categories for how your vampirism manifests, how you relate to energy, it's three, because it's not a binary. It's not meant to be like all the boys are one way and all the girls are one way. And because I found that kind of useless for this system, especially when you're talking people. Reincarnation's a big part of it. You haven't been a boy every single time. I haven't been a whatever. Like we change.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Like, we try on different clothes. Vampires love costumes, and we do the same thing with bodies. Like, we're immortal on a different level, and we just take up bodies as garments and go from different points of view. And like, what's it like this time? If you're a gamer, gamers do this, where it's like, okay, I've played Skyrim 550,000 times. What's it like if I roll a Dunmer this time and they have red hair? Like how do I do it differently this time? And for me, that's our experience with reincarnation. Okay, so pronouns are a big thing.
Yeah.
Making sure that we're a little clearer. For the 90s, I thought I was clear enough on consent. So I'm love me or hate me, I have been one of the main voices for ethics and ethical vampirism for all the time that I've been in the community, because I don't think we should do things to people without them having some, not just like, blindly saying yes, but like actual knowledgeable consent.
Yes.
There are vampire groups out there, and they were some of the only ones that I ran across in the early 90s, who were like, we are predators of humans. It is our right. It is our grand birthright to prey upon it. And they would teach people just all of this like really edgelord stuff. And I mean, I met a few of them in goth clubs, and they were always like that guy who's like standing on the edge of the dance floor, and he's just like, just staring at this girl. And I'm like, buddy, first of all, you could just go talk to her.
Like, come on.
Second of all, who hurt you that you need to do it? Like,
Ted, it's okay. Ted, it's gonna be all right.
Like seriously.
Take a breath. Just go talk. It's all right.
I'm Gen X too. They told us we just had to suck it up. No therapy, just like whatever. I get it. And also, you don't have to be this way. We don't have to be this way.
Yeah. Just mouth breathing in the corner, just like,
dude.
Okay.
So many, right. And like one of those is somebody who's like got really big in music, and then has had a little bit of a crash because enough. I'm just like, I'm not surprised. We had a conversation about ethics. Not at all. Not at all surprised. I will say that our goth club in Cleveland was their former practice space. So if you go digging around, you will probably get an idea of who it was. But yeah, had a conversation with them about vampirism. It won't shock you if you poke around. Okay. So other changes. Actually, I am going to go on another rant. So one of the reasons that consent is so important is, so we've got this system. Priests are the most vampiric. Warriors are folks who don't often even realize that they're vampiric. They're more inclined to get like ambient energy. Like they tend to ground. They tend to be less sensitive to energy, sort of by definition. Like it's their default to ground and to shield. Counselors, a lot of people will mistake for empaths. They are folks who the way that they relate to energy is with emotion, and they process everything sort of like there. If we were talking about like where do you process your energy, priests, it's very cerebral. It's very up here, tend to be really visual, but that's not a default. But very much they're people who live in their heads. Heart for counselor type, and the warriors are gut. Like most of their psychic experiences, most of their other stuff are all processed by gut. Well, again, 90s and everything being what it is. So many people, way too many people in certain communities were like, oh, the counselors are the subs and the priests are the doms. And so we're just going to make the counselors all be our little subs. And I am very done with meeting poor, traumatized people that somebody was just like, you are my counselor. It is your existence to feed me. Fall in line. What? And then cite my book as their reason. And I am very over that. It is cringy. It is terrible. And so like we made sure to put in as much as we could to be like, no, that is not what we're trying to teach you to do. We're saying that these three are a circuit. The best place, the person who did the best representation of this, if you're familiar with Laurel K. Hamilton's fiction and you've read the Anita Blake series, you'll recognize a word that you'll encounter in the Psychic Vampire Codex, which is triumvirate, where these three types of energy workers, three types of vampires all work together in there's this really potent, like stronger together energy like thing. So you've got like Anita and Jean-Claude and whoever their third is. But if you like kind of look at stuff and be like, hey, Anita's kind of a counselor, Jean-Claude is kind of a priest, and Richard is kind of a warrior. I wonder where this came from. And to credit Laurel, that was one of those parallelisms of we were both like, hey, you do this too? Yeah, I do this too. Do you remember this too? Yeah, I remember. And then we had some conversations off of Twitter.
Ooh.
But so the other thing is to try to be really clear that this is not that priests are like, there's no hierarchy here. It's not that one is better than the other. It is trying to express that they are different ways of connecting to energy, of processing energy. We did a sensitivity read of some of the language because, vampires are pale. Well, if you are a melanated individual, that might mislead you.
Yes.
And there were some body type stuff that frankly was just based off of the very small subset of people I was working with. And we've smoothed out stuff like that. So it's more inclusive. And fixed typos. Like this book's been in print since 2004. And the previous publisher there's always going to be typos, but there are a few where I'm like, it's been in so many multiple editions. Would it have killed you to go in and fix this one? Would it have killed you? Let's see. What else? What else did we do, dear? Good Lord, so much. Abry and my wife Lyria, have been like doing an additional read, because the thing is, as the writer, sometimes you can be too close. So I'm like, all right, what am I missing? What else do we need to do with this? Well,
that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, no, yeah, this is my lovely wife. Hello. Who is, not meant to be cared, but probably doesn't care.
Nope. Not ready. And also, is your stream, so I will just have my face creeping into a tiny bit of it.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite change that we came up with?
My favorite change is that instead of centering a different person in the introduction to the Vampire Codex, we made it about past lives instead of random chance encounters in the vampire community in the 90s.
Oh yeah, okay.
Which is so much cooler.
Yeah, I kind of was dodging that, but so there's a truism in publishing, and that truism is, if your first name is Michelle, there are some different doors that maybe don't open for you. If your name were Michael, it would have been different. And especially in the time period where I was trying to get stuff published. So I cannot count the number of times where I would pitch this book and just incessantly people would be like, they needed a man to introduce it, is really what it came down to. And I wish that were not the case. But so like they needed someone else to write the introduction and be like, well, we need to establish you as an authority. I'm like, I have literally been doing this since 94. Like, I am cited here, 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 and here. Like, how am I not an authority? Like, well, we just want someone. Oh, I get it. My name's Michelle. And I wish that were not the case. It is incredibly annoying. Not gonna lie, when the book came out, the most hate I got was all centered on my perceived gender identity. And the majority of people who wanted to tear me down were like, you couldn't have come up with these deep occult truths. Who did you sleep with?
Oh,
like,
my God.
That was it was the wild, wild west in comments. And it's why for a while I was just like, nope, not so much with the internet. You all suck.
Yeah.
Like, please stop. I honestly just, not gonna lie, scarring, and also astounding. Like why is that even a thing?
It's insecurity.
It is. So we took what had gotten buried in the back, which frankly is, I'll spoiler it. In 98, I think, 97, 98, a friend from Chicago who liked to create chaos was like, hey, I met this friend and I think that there's a connection between you and him. And I was like, cool. He's like, we're going through following this this Hindu living saint, and she's going to be like in your area, and can we crash at your place? And I just want to see what happens if I introduce you to. Yeah. So I am at that point where I am also like actively, consciously processing certain past lives by writing stories about them. One of which was in late 1100s, early 1200s. And it was, for me, the last life I was able to incarnate in for a significant chunk of time, because I felt someone recognized me and like did some stuff to me to be like, you sit in a corner and think about things and like get your shit together. Wow. That's hyper simplifying it. But so my friend Wish, who was this wild-haired radical fairy, shows up, and they pull up outside of my apartment, and I see someone get out of the car who looks like someone I had a memory of, and it was somebody who tortured me to death. Like this was the person who was like, you, I had processed. I have this story still, and I'm like, well, that's weird. And then they come up, and who's at the actual front door looks completely different. And I'm like, oh, okay. And of course, I'm like, these aren't things you just like spit out to people. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll just kind of take some time to get to know the person. Yeah. He sits in my computer chair. I'm on the couch. My friend Wish is just like, chaos. I'm a fairy. I love chaos. We all know. And we kind of like dance around one another. Eventually, he's just like, I know you. Didn't I take you out of the wheel for a while? And I was like,
wow,
I thought that was my okay, that's your thing. We stayed up for 36 hours straight talking.
Wow.
We just did not stop. Wow. But I had done work with vampire stuff at the time, and I'd done like the underground press, and I was almost always writing under a pen name. Like I didn't always release the codex under Michelle, like it was under Tasha, it was under Lady Uriel on AOL. Like I was really hesitant to be like, this is 100% my stuff. And 98 is when like that experience, Vinay was like, no, you've got a legacy, like you've got a responsibility to just kind of tell people like the people who are connected to you, like you all have like a karmic entanglement. Like he was coming from a Hindu background. He was, Indian Hindi, who was raised in Scotland. He had a fantastic accent. And just, I can't actually go into all of the revelation. Like it was a wild time. But imagine having these extraordinary beliefs that you can just barely trust yourself, that this isn't just something that you've made up and been carrying around in your head as a story, that you're just trying to feel, I don't know, like whatever. And then somebody you've never met, never physically met, and they just sit down and they're like, well, yeah, of course. And they just tell you the things. Like he'd never read the story. I didn't say crap about that. He described the perspective of the person who I remembered interacting with. Like it was one of those core memory, like tentpole experiences of like, okay, this is really real. Like in 96, in 95, 96, I'd had the like, yes, I'm a vampire. Yes, I'm vampiric. This is something that I have to do. But committing to sort of what that meant, that was that thing. So that is more in the introduction now. Like you get a little better context for why it's important for me to tell this from a Keprian perspective, from this weird legacy that we are all tied in with. And also why seek your own truth is important, because yes, I'm speaking from that perspective. I think anybody can only speak from their own perspective. And that doesn't mean that there isn't useful stuff there that other people can make use of, even if it only tells them that that's not how they function.
Exactly.
Whew.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And I think that just to have that validation, that moment of just, oh my gosh, this is so like, I thought this was all just in my head, and to have somebody just kind of be like, it's just absolutely incredible. That's incredible.
No, it was wild. I mean, well, because I'm still a little bit of a coward when it comes to some of that stuff, because okay, this is the original.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see here.
Part 2 Origin. Oh.
That's never been in print. That is only in this book.
I would love for that to be in print, though.
So,
selfishly, I would love for that to be in print.
Oh, Shane, do I get any past life feelings from Jack? Yes. Okay. I am, as much as I'm a wild, weird person doing psychic stuff on things like paranormal state and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually a skeptic, like a true skeptic, in the sense of I think it'll be easier for me to explain it like this. In House Kepru, trying to figure, for my personal path too, trying to figure out like the pieces of the puzzle of this other thing that is big and wild and really defies what we've been raised to believe is how reality works, has been so hard for this national merit scholar who had it at 35 on the science of the ACT to like really commit to.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. I'm an escapee from academia. Like my life path was to like just continue straight to the PhD, be a college professor, probably have 2 cats, a lot of books, drink tea, and just wear tweed. Who knows?
It's incredible.
Probably black tweed. So one of the rules in House Kepru is, and it's the rule that I've set, don't tell someone who or what they are. And that's not just to like dangle things over them, but I have seen how much it means when somebody gets there themselves. And I have seen, especially in like the 90s and whatnot, where people would weaponize this to manipulate others. Like, we all probably know that person who just like sweeps across the floor and they're like, I have crossed oceans of time, you are my long lost. And I mean, there was
yes. Oh Lord.
Who like that was pretty much how he hooked up with people. They were all his past wife.
Oh my God.
Story every time, and it made me, I mean, furious. The number of people would fall for it. Also, like really made me be like, we can't do that. We can't be that. So here's sort of like what we've sorted out is, if I think I recognize you, I make a point of, I go somewhere and I write out or in some way record what I think as much as I can. If it's tied to like specific lives or whatnot, I make sure I've got a written record. In the house, we usually give somebody a spotter if we think two people are like really tied. So that person is not connected to the little tangle of memories that they've got. So you've got an objective outside observer who, I'd write my stuff out, you'd write your stuff out. The third person gets it and can be like, here's where you overlap, so that nobody's tainting anybody else's experience. We're not unintentionally front loading one another. And we have as accurate an assessment as possible.
Yeah.
I do have probably a better memory of stuff than one I'm ever willing in most cases to admit. And two, probably healthy. And three, then is functional for other people, because there's what I think I remember. Experience has also taught me that what my perspective in any given lifetime might have been is not always what the other person's experience was, really. And it's important to take that into account. So I might have like passed somebody in the hall and developed this whole idea of who they were. Or we had one isolated experience and like, that's what stuck with me. But then there's all this other stuff that was going on for them. And I know that that's worked for me too, where there's some people, actually there's Heideka, I'm going to call you out without like giving any other context. I was on a show in Norway through a weird, curious bunch of events called Den andre siden. It was live recorded, and there was a person living in Norway who recognized me on their stuff and like had some profound memory connections that they associated with me, but it hit them in a like, I am terrified of this person. Terrible things happened. When they finally worked up the courage, they'd come to the House Kepru event, and like we're very good friends now. And actually, I will say that they're probably one of the most gifted spirit mediums I have ever met. When she talked about what she remembered, and we did the sort of like, I'll show you mine if you show me yours, past life wise, it was about perspective. But I was absolutely the bad guy in her story.
Wow.
And that's the thing, is like finding out that this is, to me, that makes it more real, because it's not some like neat, I don't know how many people out there have like, you know, your little baby group of like, you're just starting out as like little occultists or witches or whatever. And you're like, I think that we were, the one that was big in the 80s was, I'm Arthur and I'm Guinevere and I'm Lancelot. I knew about 5 groups like that. And like they all like kind of went through this psychodrama, not realizing that, yeah, you connect to the story and the characters, and maybe there's parts of you that are reflected in that, and it's giving you context and it's giving you names, but it's not really you. And they would just sort of turn into this terrible cluster mess of just feeding into one another, and everybody gets so tangled up, and it always ended in tears. Just always. That I think it's not a neat narrative. Like it's not simple. Like sometimes you realize that, yo, you actually were the bad guy in somebody's story. Like you did something terrible, because we're not always nice. Sometimes it's circumstantial. Anyway, so the simple answer for Shane and for you is I believe you seem you are familiar to me in a pretty significant way. I have compared notes with some other people who you seem familiar to. I also want to be very careful, because I think it's important for you to be who you are.
Yeah.
And I don't want to dictate to you anything that doesn't fit in your worldview. That would be unfair.
I'm so curious though. I'm so curious though. No. Just to add to that, there have been a lot of feels with a lot of certain members that I have spoken to, and yourself, that have been very unshakable things. And
Thing is Shane seems familiar too.
I would not. I'm going to put Shane on the spot for a second, real quick, and put Shane on the spot. So it's really funny because Shane and I speak about past life things often. Like we've been very much on the secret work together. We've been, weaving through all of this. Shane has been an incredible resource and shoulder and just partner in all of this, especially the spiritual, occult, and everything else, and being a vampire. And we've spoken about this, and we've had very interesting experiences where Shane had somebody tell her that she never had a past life before, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know.
See, that hits my thing of like somebody told her what her experience was, and I'm like,
Exactly.
People who are like, well, I went to a psychic to have them read my past lives, and I'm like, well, technically, it's strictly possible to like go rifling around in somebody's head and pull things forward. One, I think that's rude. I think it's presumptuous because if I'm reading your stuff, I'm always going to look at it through my perspective. So I might interpret something like, say you had a past life as a literal dragon, and that is something that doesn't fit into my worldview at all. Like, I've been to that psychic who's just like trying to find some way to like describe it, and if they're coming from like a really Christian point, like there's so many ways that they try to. It's just not fair to the person. Like, we have to respect each person's path and journey. And like, I can give input of be like, this is my experience. This is what I think, with the caveat that at the end of the day, you get to decide.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's just, I'm so curious. I am buzzing. I am very much buzzing. And Shane has a remarkable story where, I don't know, can I tell it here? That story? Can I? It's pretty wild. It's very interesting. So we had been doing a kind of just a meditation together. Yeah, she's screaming. Yes.
Okay.
She screamed yes. We had been doing a meditation together, and we were also going over. Hi.
Story.
I'm telling the story. Was it the? Are we reading the audiobook? Shane? She's gone. Is she gone?
My wife does that too. Just
and gone. Fully Batman, just poof out into the corner. So I can't remember exactly. It was either we were doing meditation or we were listening to the audiobook I had just put together. It was the audiobook for Blood and Roses. And we were kind of just like checking it out, and I was playing it for her. And for her, she said to me as it was happening, she said, the room is vibrating. It's vibrating all of a sudden. Like all of a sudden, like the edges of my vision are kind of like shivering. And I was like, okay, all right, you're good. I'm right here. You're like, let me know, like, you're okay. Don't worry about it. Shane comes back kind of too, and recants how for a moment she had a very extremely like lucid vision that she was in like back in time, and that she was in a place she could not recall. It was like in the mountains somewhere, and she was on this line, and she saw me, and I turned and I made eye contact with her, and I looked at her as if like, what are you doing here? Like not in like a mean way, but in a like, oh hey, what are you doing here? And then the next thing she knew, it felt as if a pair of hands grabbed her shoulders and pulled her back into the present. And it was just so interesting to me, because it was like, okay, there's something interesting going on there. There has to be. But interesting, very interesting.
Like I make fun of the like, I have cross oceans of time guy who's just like pickup line. But also like there are, okay, it's a very new agey idea called soul groups, but like it's basically the idea that like people just get connected with one another. We get tangled up with one another and have a tendency to like run into one another and over again. And we do see this in just regular human stuff. Like communities get very niche and get very interconnected. We just had something like that happen today where like on the House Kepru list, Hex, who was out for New Blood. I don't know if you've met or not, but Hex is also a traditional witch, like traditional witchcraft, Luciferian stuff. And I had linked an old connection to the VVC, which was the Voices of the Vampire Community, which was this attempt to have kind of like a Vampire United Nations. It wasn't the first, but it was one of the most like organized. And he was like, I didn't know Rune was part of the vampire community. I was like, oh, you didn't? Like I was talking about when I mentioned this person by a name, a Kipri name, that's who I was talking about. They're like, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. Like, and they were just like, here's how this connect, how like these weird connections, all like, I almost moved. How? And I'm like,
well, that's amazing.
At this point, I'm so jaded though, where I'm like, yeah, that just seems to happen. Like, I have joked that we are connected by psychic bungee cords. Like, we'll just get like yanked into one another's paths. It's broken any of my sense of what coincidence is actually like. Like, I don't know what other people's lives are, but if somebody's just like, hey, I ran into this person who reminded me of you, my initial default is going to be like, oh, was his name so-and-so? And they're like, how did you know? And it will turn out to be that person. That's normal in my life. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, there's just a level of like magic and synchronicity and connectedness that like, we're just, I don't know, swimming along on a different level. And I'm generalizing, and sort of like, there's a deeper part of me that's like, well, yes, of course. Like, we bound one another together by mutual implications. Like, there's a common point, and we share it, and of course, we're not done. And also, you know, for all the regular folks, it's still weird though. Like, the little person who's like born in this life, like grew up in freaking Midwest Ohio. Cows, corn, and hippies. I'm like, isn't that weird though? The old me is like, oh no, this is just how it's supposed to be. And I'm like, thanks, dude, but seriously, it's weird. It's still really weird.
I need to piggyback, and it's almost like there's someone behind you just kind of patting your head and just like, it's okay. Go with it. It's all right. And like the vessel is like, are you like, this is, is this like real? Am I hallucinating? It's like, shh.
I was promised science. Science would make sense. Like, this is what I was promised. This is why I got straight A's and a scholarship. Like, this is not what I thought my life was going to be. Come on. Oh, this time fun. Yeah. The weirder things are like, okay, so the Psychic Vampire Codex, the mythic history that's like implied in there with priest and warrior and counselor, which again, if you resonate with, you're going to be like, I thought I was the only one that was carrying this around in my head. What is this? And if you don't, that's fine. Like, literally, first rule of reading any book, read it to see what you like, what works for you, what you disagree with, what doesn't work for you. Take notes and take whatever works, leave behind anything that doesn't. Because no book's going to be perfect for anybody. But if the mythic history, I think the thing that's broken my head the most is, like, I wrote a lot of that stuff out, like, just dared myself to finally like write it down like a story in the early 90s now. Several of the things that I remembered just couldn't be possible because they didn't exist. Like, it wasn't part of history. It wasn't. And then they dug things up in the places that I remembered. Like there are certain things where I was like, how like 20 years later, like there's like weird advances in what, and they're like, hey, there's a thing here. And I'm like, oh, you know, I was actually more comfortable if it was just a story I told myself, but I guess where we're at.
Like, but like, you sure it's not a fiction? It's like, no, little buddy, just relax.
It would be so comfortable. Like so comfortable if it was just shit I made up.
Yeah.
And then I just keep meeting people who remember it and who are like, wait, weren't you the person who did this thing? And I was like, well, actually that one was my brother, but it's easy to confuse us, but that's fine.
It's just so like, it's so cool. It's so cool. It's like, so cool.
Okay, like I couldn't write a book this weird. I don't think anyone would let me.
I love it. I love it though, because it's like, whenever I'm on my live streams, And so there's always like a naysayer or a troll or some like person that's just bored. And they're like, blah, 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 not true, or whatever. I just go, hey, do me a favor. Look at me. Lock eyes. Okay. Which would you rather be? Would you live your life not believing in magic? Would you live your life believing just living a mundane existence, all that? Or would you rather consider the possibility that there's more than just you? Hey, and even if, hey, whatever you choose, why don't you do the research? Just read one of these books. Read the Psychic Vampire Codex. Read it. See what you think. And if anything, you'll find it fascinating because I don't know. Because it is.
I'm Captain F-Bomb. It's fine.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure if I could do it here.
Oh Lord, no. I cost somebody a lot of money because I didn't realize that they had an FCC. Yeah, that was a thing. Oops.
Yes, but no, it's like I don't understand why someone wouldn't want to just look into it, do the research, find out about this. And even if you don't believe, it's still fascinating to just open up your mind, have your perspective a little shift a little broader. So that way you can allow something that you may never have known, never have even considered. And who knows, maybe it'll wake something in you. And I think your book, I think the Psychic Vampire Codex is that book to read. It really is. Because most of the time, a lot of us don't know what is going on with us. A lot of us don't. We don't. And even before reading your book, there could be a chance of not knowing what's going on or never even thinking about it. But reading your book, reading those words, seeing that experience and these things that are possible, it might just take you to a place you never expected to go. And it's an incredible journey, an incredible book. And read it if you haven't. Get it if you haven't. Pre-order it. What are you doing? What are you doing?
It is wild to me, actually, to consider like all of the ways that it's spidered out and the fiction that it's inspired, but also the real stuff. Like there's a pagan convention that used to meet in San Jose, California, and I was out there as a speaker a couple of times. And conversations happen among the various guest speakers. So I'm out there as a vampire among a bunch of like witches and whatnot. And inevitably people are like, why are you here? What does it have to do with witchcraft and paganism? We're all okay. First of all, one of the reasons that vampirism hived off of all of that stuff is like, y'all told us we couldn't stand in your circles because we were too dark. I was over it. So I decided to make my own thing. But I'm willing to play nice because now it's totally okay to be like, for witches to be like, it's all the dark gods and goddesses and all the Luciferian stuff. It used to be like, there was no place for that. Mm-hmm. The vampire community was where you went, and maybe some of the occult community. But like, I ended up having a conversation with a fellow named Isaac Bonowitz, who's kind of a big name, wrote a pretty neat book called Real Magic. And we talked, because what they were trying to wrap their head around, he and Margot Adler, and yes, I'm name dropping some very big pagan names. And believe me or not, these conversations happened. Margot was really against the whole, like, she's like, I don't know, like, I think the whole vampire thing is kind of in your, like I think it's just a bunch of kids playing dress up. I'm like, that's totally your prerogative, but wasn't that what people believed of witches when you were writing your book?
Exactly. No, I don't know.
And Isaac was like, okay, so, but like, what is your magic? And I'm like, it's just about energy. Like, I tried to pare everything down. Like, I took everything on the altar and I chucked it out. And I took all the pentacles, like I stripped down, like, what is happening when I do magic? Because I was like, okay, I've got my athame, I've got my wand, I've got my crystals, but I don't connect to those the same way. Like, I recognize how I can use those as a focus, but what was happening under it? And so we had this deep, like, couple hours long conversation about energy and energy work. And comes out with his follow-up shortly thereafter, about a year and a half after, Real Energy. Because it got him thinking. Like, he really got thinking about it. Margot Adler instead like wrote something for NPR about like all these young whippersnappers getting rants about their vampires, and I was like, Margot, honey, I'm a little sad, but okay. But oh no, it's still funny because Christopher Penczak is a very good friend, and I don't understand, like when I first started to like be like, here is vampire stuff, I would reach out to like Wiccan and pagan and witchcraft groups, and I'm like, the Wiccan Pagan Press Alliance was a thing that existed in the 90s, and that was Silver Ravenwolf, and she refused to let us be part of it. Like she was just like, you're not witches, like we don't want vampires. She just won't return my emails.
Come on.
But I was idealistic. I was like, but we're all kind of coming at things from the idea that reality is bigger and magic is real and we're part of it, right? Mm-hmm. And it astounds me how many people are like, but you're just playing dress up as vampires, and it's a witch telling me that. I'm like, do you not? Like, you reclaimed your whole thing. You're like, well, you're not really undead. I'm like, you're not actually like a weird warty green person who casts plagues on your neighbor's cattle either.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. It's so true. No.
like there is this idea of like, this is a magical identity. It is informed by the stories we tell as much as by reality. And it is no less valid than any of the other magical identities out there. And I've never understood why we can't just all get along.
I don't understand. I don't understand it either. I don't. Anytime somebody goes to say something mean to me, they go, look up vampire in the dictionary. Just look up vampire in the dictionary. See what the definition of vampire is. Is that not what we are doing? In a way.
Are the ones who are like, oh, but you're dressed, you've got your fangs on, you're dressing up, like it's just dress up. And I'm like, have you seen the pictures of Laurie Cabot when she would do interviews? Like, I'm sorry, how is this different?
Yeah.
Well, no, how is it different? It is not different.
Like, why can't we have fun?
Yeah, like
where's the rule?
But witches would dress up as witches. They loved Bewitched. It's not significantly different. It is simply a different pathway toward an empowering magical identity.
You know what's interesting too? One thing I have noticed is whenever I do, especially when I wear my fangs, when like we've spoken very briefly about magic and makeup and magic and outfits, etc. When I wear like my makeup style, especially when it's the full the eye fangs, I find it much easier to tap into myself, to tap into that. Like I've always known about myself, and then there was so much validation, but especially when it is like nowadays when we have like the moments in the feeds and the mass feeds, etc. There I do notice that, especially when I am fully in it, that there is an elevation. That's the best way I can put it. There's an elevation. Like it's me, but it's more than just me. And it's almost is like a boost in a lot of ways. And I think that almost like a totem. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for, like a totem, like something to hone in on. So while someone might see makeup or fangs or contacts or anything like that, it also can be a tool. It absolutely can. So, and then even if it wasn't a tool, get bent. It's fun. We look good. Deal with it.
In paganism and witchcraft, like you've got your sword, you create your circle, like there's a lot of trappings for setting up a space. And one of the things that does distinguish the vampire community, especially as a spiritual or magical path versus witchcraft as such, it's incredibly individual. Like it's very much like I am empowering myself. It's not about gods or goddesses. It's not to say that there aren't folks in the vampire community who do connect with divinities, but it is very much first day like, I am the power. This is my power. I am manifesting my power. So you're not going out and casting a circle, the sacred space is you. The space that you're trying to elevate and create as a space moving between this realm and the next is right here. So of course, what you're going to focus on is changing that so that you can better embody this sort of bridge beyond this ordinary self and this deeper, more powerful, like this other part of you that is like the magically activated part of you.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's why with vampires, you're going to see a lot of costuming. You're going to see a lot of fashion. You're going to see a lot of change, like a lot of makeup, because it's here first.
Yeah.
And then everything else is a choice to move outside of that or to expand that to other people. But here is where we do our magic.
Ooh.
Yeah. Kismet, yes, 100%.
Oh, I
Theater,
love that.
the original sacred performance. Divorcing the theater from the energy is doing a bit of a disservice to the practitioner. Why make the work harder? 100%.
Exactly.
And I would actually argue that one of the reasons we have a negative sense of indulging in the theater and the trapping and stuff is the pushback from the Christian right telling us what we can and can't do.
Yep.
And I mean, I lived through the Satanic Panic. There were a lot of choices made, especially among Wiccans and witches, to try to be like, no, we're totally not like that. Like, that's why it was so white light and fluffy and bubblegum in the 80s and the early 90s, because they were desperately. And the thing is that hoop they ask you to jump through in order for them to approve of your practice is an ever shifting mark intended just to keep you jumping so that you don't actually ever do what is authentic for you. They're never going to approve about it.
Spot on.
So
it's
just
spot on.
You will never gain their approval by trying to adjust to their demands. They will just make more demands.
You know, I was. It's so funny. We're so beat for beat. I was just about to say too, like, there is, especially within the vampire community, so much self-denial so often because of the way that we have been persecuted, viewed, treated, etc., where like you said about the witch community. The witch community faced so much persecution, but nowadays you have a lot of people accepting more witchcraft things. You have more stores that are very open about it, etc. But, you know, when you tell someone you're a vampire, when you go, well, this is what I do. Like, I remember when I told Shane, the first time I ever told Shane, Shane's a best-selling vampire author. Shane's very much within the know. And I remember how terrified I was to tell Shane because of what I faced when I was younger. And the way I told her was, I'm practice vampirism. I'm Batman. And it's so funny because, like, looking back at it, there is also another function dressing up does. It kills that denial. You live it, you know it, and I think that's one of the fun things. Like, one of the reasons why, especially, I have continued even after coming out of the coffin, etc., to the public. Why I still do it, not only just for the aesthetic, but even when I'm talking about what my spiritual practice is and what are my beliefs. Because if people view this as a vampire, if this is viewed as a vampire, take it back. Take it back. We take it back, wear it, enjoy it, and screw the persecution, screw people's judgments. We're here. It doesn't matter what they think. It doesn't matter how they view us. We have our truth. We know what we experience, and that's what matters.
Yeah, I didn't want to call it for a lot of reasons. So it's manifesting in the codex, but it's that charisma that most vampires have, some ability to kind of project what they want to other people. Sometimes that's, don't see me. Like, I've got a housemate who their ability to manifest is, you will not notice that they are in a room. Like, you just simply will. They will fade from memory. They have totally got Mask of a Thousand Faces. They've got full on obfuscate. They're just gone. And that is their comfort place. They're not someone who would ever want to be like front and center. But also, if you're someone who thrives off of energy, it is important to be able to just be like, to be a showman, to be able to like just draw people in, to like show the face that catches the attention, that draws in everything, so that you, at the very least, have the ambient energy
Yeah.
of an audience.
Yeah.
Even those of us who secretly, or maybe not so secretly, are actually incredibly introverted.
I'm just, yeah. It's amazing the way that we talk. Most people would never ever think about that at all. But we both have this deep showmanship where it's like we know it's ingrained within us. It really is. So it's like the moment we speak, like everyone's none the wiser.
Mm.
But when we're on our own, it's like,
oh yeah, we're just like, people know.
Back into my cave.
Yeah. Nope.
Where's my Baldur's Gate?
Literally, like all of my space is in the basement, where it's just like nice and
yes,
sequestered and very insulated and very cool and very lightless, and that is my happy space.
Oh, it is lovely.
Somebody had asked, like, well, how do you know you're not just an extrovert and you're just needing people around you? I'm like, oh, I know I'm not an extrovert. Like, there's no question there. I actually would really very happily exist far, far away from everyone, except I have to eat them.
Oh yeah, they taste good, so that's their fault. Pumpkin spice season. What do they expect?
It helps when we have lovely partners who are willing to like be the main course. From Blood-Sucking Lover, you both feel introverted. I just assume you have theater kid syndrome. We are both theater kids, right? Like, there's we have musical theater background in there, and the number of, especially priesty types, that would be that tend to theatrical. God, let me see. What I had like a laundry list of like theater kid, musical, musician, very like MC, like one who was an MC in like a little like indie WWF knockoff thing, like just something that puts you at the center of things, where to some extent you can adopt a persona and use that persona as a filter for some of the energy that you are doing, but also a way of boosting it, because there's that you're doing that energy work all the time. Like, it's so much a part of you. One of the other reasons I wrote the Psychic Vampire Codex is there's a lot of people who don't realize that this is how they function. And nobody can make a choice to be ethical or to get consent if they have no clue that this is what they're doing.
Sure.
And I wanted to put that choice in people's hands. Like, people can still go off and do whatever they want. It's not like there is literally vampire police that are going to show up on your door and like, shake their fingers at you or whatever. Like that if somebody tells you that exists, they are they're pulling your leg or they're delusional. But even if you are like a super like left-hand path leaning, I am I'm God unto myself, sort of like really self-focused, like that's part of your path, you get so much more power if you work with others.
Yeah.
And you do so functionally, because there are more of them than there are of you. And that's an argument I've been having with like some of the darker, spookier aspects of the vampire community, because I'm like, it's just good sense.
Yeah.
Like, you get more if you work functionally. Like, ask Jeffrey Dahmer. Who grew up not very far from me, by the way.
I fully agree with you, by the way. Like, fully agree with you. We are very much on the same page with this one. Yeah. But I also agree. I also feel that I think there has to be a point where, don't mind me saying this, but I think as the greater VC, as a greater vampire community, I think there needs to be more tolerance, more conversations, more philosophical like talks, to where everyone has their views and everyone can talk about these kind of things, and we don't have to just fall down a mountain when we disagree. I think it just needs to be that we have our paths and our viewpoints of this, and we exist. However, I will say I truly do believe consent is the biggest thing. Fully seeing what feeding can do.
Seriously, no, like that.
It's so
that's the thing is, okay, I'm gonna tell, like, here's some dirty laundry. So
let's go.
my freshman year of college, hooked up with someone who I like was finally like, okay, this is what I think is going on. And I got him to agree to me feeding off of him. And this is the first time that like I really was allowed to just like go to town on someone, feed off of them as much as I wanted to. And I went straight for like just feeding directly over his heart.
Ah, I've been there.
So he goes into heart palpitations and
Oh.
tachycardia, and we are subsequently not very long after that, we're in the emergency room looking like two very, very awkward, because what, I'm 18, he's 18, he's 19, he was a year older than me. And we're in the emergency room and they're trying to figure out like what the heck is wrong here. Because I just knocked his heart's rhythm like straight out. And he nicknamed me Rogue thereafter from the X-Men. Was very shy about having me touch him anytime after for a little while. Because
you're like, oh, do I need to wear gloves? How does this work?
I actually did for a little while. Like I do a lot of work with leather as a shielding thing. So I was like, you know what? I'll just enchant my gloves and make it so like this reminds me that I have a barrier between me and people.
That is great. That makes sense. I have a story, but I have to use a bathroom for 2 seconds.
Go do
I
that.
will be right back, but I really have a story to tell you.
Seriously. Trip to the emergency room, first time I fed. You go do your thing. Other questions? Well, Jack is gone. I will say while Jack is gone, Jack was supposed to come out for filming with New Blood. There were every delay possible. But prior to that, I made sure I recorded, I think it's a 12-minute solo video of just, here are my impressions of Jack and Shane from the way back. So just so you know, I know Shane, you're listening. Jack, you'll probably see this again. There is a record there just for when maybe things pop up and maybe they don't. Who knows? No expectations. Yeah, most embarrassing. Well, not the most embarrassing thing that happened to me with somebody in college, but that was from Mandy Stewart. How do we help someone that is a vampire who doesn't know yet? Is there a safe way to send them energy? That's actually a really good question because I've had people try to send me energy and it's different. It hits differently if somebody's just throwing energy at me. So my experience is most people who are naturally vampiric actually need to be the ones taking the energy, which is problematic because if they don't know consciously that they're doing it, they're just kind of hoovering off of everybody and it's kind of a pain in the neck sometimes. What I would do rather than being like, hey buddy, I think you're a vampire, because that doesn't always hit right. Maybe it's not part of their worldview. What is, like, understand what is their perspective, like what is the level of belief that they have for weird shit. If there's someone who can understand, hey, you're kind of draining around people, like talk in language that they resonate with, meet them from their perspective and see if you can't get them to a point where they recognize they are having an impact on people around them. Whether they call that vampirism or vibes, energy, or just, personality drain, whatever, see if you can meet them from where they're coming from. And I would avoid just telling someone, this is what you are. If there's ways you can open a door for them to kind of get there themselves, it is so much more meaningful for them. But also, humans are contrary beings. If you go up to somebody who, especially if this is something that like they kind of suspect in the back of their head and they really don't want to admit it and they're conflicted about it. A lot of folks who are vampiric, a lot of folks who have any quality about their person that just doesn't fit, there's a conflict there. Humans are contrary. If you just walk up to them and like, you're a vampire, you'll have one of two reactions generally. One of those reactions is, fuck you, no I'm not, and then they'll dig in, and what you'll have done is basically set them back in their own development, because now they're just going to be trying to prove you wrong, because no they're not. And if they're like, oh, 100%, and they take your perspective without getting theirs first, they might find themselves kind of like going down a path that doesn't fit, which could also set them back. So it's just easier to be, can we have a dialogue that helps them get there first? And it's slower. It requires a fair amount of patience. Won't happen overnight, but it is healthier.
I'm back.
Hello.
So I want to tell a story real quick. I don't know if I told you this story.
Okay, probably not.
I don't know. So okay, so people from the community probably know this story, but I'm going to tell them anyway because I want to tell you. So Shane and I are doing a feed, right? We're about to do a feed. We've set up everything right in here. Actually, we're about to do energy pull. We're about to do a pull, and Shane had just been sick. And I said I'm on about 5 days not fed, and I'm like dragging. Yeah,
where you're really starting to feel it, and it's gonna happen.
And she's like, no, please, I want to help. I'm like, listen, I'm gonna be fine. It's not a big deal. I want you to be 100%. Trust me. I have seen what this can do. Trust me. No. I want to help. I'm like, okay. She's the most tenacious person I've ever met. I mean, I love that about her. But sometimes
she's ferocious.
She is. And she's like, no, I want to help you. And I'm like, fine. But if something goes wrong, never again when you're sick. She's like, okay. So we're all set up. Incense is going and candles are lit, etc. Everything, the whole thing. And I go just like straight for the heart. And I'm like, because I'm at that point where I'm like, oh God, I know I need this. I'm like, okay, don't pull too much. Hold back. And I go in.
Hard though, like
I know.
Such a focal point, and you're just like, oh, yep, yeah. Rhythm, I've lost.
I go right in, and I pull. Shane faints. Her vision goes white. She never fainted before, ever. Vision goes white. Her eyes roll back, and she goes zoop. And I luckily, like in a movie, catch her, and I keep her from hitting the ground. And she comes to and starts panicking, and I'm like, okay. And I look her in the face and I go, never when you're sick. This is real. Trust me, it is. And yeah, it's amazing to have those experiences. Terrifying to have those experiences in those moments. But guys, validating. Oh my goodness.
So many people have. The real reason the vampire will like come up behind you, like put an arm around you and like tip over your neck and feed from behind is so they can just hold you against your body when their knees drop out from underneath them and they sag against you and they pass out. Or just, sort of lose their ability to stand. Like that's absolutely, that's a thing. It helps if you're taller than them. But I usually, like, especially if somebody who's like, no, I totally think that this is fine. I'll handle it. And I'm like, how about I push you up against a wall? Why am I? Oh, that's hot. I'm like, also very practical. I can hold you here when your knees go out from under you.
Oh my! I love get lost in the sauce. I see get lost in the sauce. That's a brand new. Need to keep that.
Or those moments. I don't know if this has happened to you yet, and like these were a little brain breaky for me. I talk about it in the codex with I called it a rosette because I was like, this is different from the hickey. I tested because I was like, all right, well, I'm feeding with my mouth as the main contact, just like kind of like over the skin and like drawing in. And in a couple of cases, like I was just like, why do I taste blood? That seems weird. And then I looked down, I was like, oh, that's a mark. I didn't think I even had my lips locked on there. So I'd be like, all right, let's try to feed with that amount of intensity, but just with my fingers.
Yeah.
At which point I left rosettes for every fingertip where I'd pulled blood to the surface with them. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So noted. This is body and energy are very intertwined. And this is something to be aware of.
It's fast.
Oh,
It's
you're not wearing low-cut shirts anytime soon. Sorry.
It's just so fascinating. It really is.
The stuff where you're like, no, really, if I told you how this actually works and what I've experienced, you're just going to assume that I'm delusional and call bullshit.
Oh God, and no, it's wild. It really is, because it's like you try to you want to tell though, like you want to tell like the deep. You want to tell the
things where like your face changes.
oh,
you're like
they know.
Yeah, like well, now they know where you're like
Yeah.
You can see it in real time where like that really goes against a lot of laws of physics. That shouldn't be how and for the longest time I'd be like, well, maybe it's just I'm projecting an energetic perception, but I've seen it in other people. I'm like, nope, that is their face actually changing. I have no rational explanation for that fits within the way that we understand the laws of physics, but there it is.
It's wild. It's wild. And it's amazing because if you go and just tell someone, they're usually never going to believe you.
No,
it's so outlandish to somebody that doesn't understand. But being there, like I once again, like my favorite story is the unmasking, as I called it. I don't know. I love to call it that. The unmasking. Yeah, yeah. There's the first time that Shane saw it is one of the stories that I love to tell, of when we were in the car story. And when this guy almost T-bones us while we're doing Randonautica. To summarize, guy almost T-bones us while we're doing Randonautica. We're looking for a real vampire. Come across two houses, and we see nothing, right? Third house, like nothing. So I pull out, guy almost hits us, and I get pissed and I pull off on the road, and this guy starts walking towards the car. I'm wearing full me. Like we were just doing a shoot. We were just doing video stuff. And I was like, I'm just gonna scare the dude. 2 seconds. Like, it was totally immature. It really was. And,
but sometimes it's really hard to resist.
It is though. It's so hard to resist.
I'm
like
not gonna throw stones. I've done that.
Yeah. It's like, well, sometimes just kind of just gotta.
Sometimes you gotta get your freak on.
Just a little bit. So I roll down the window and I'm like, all right, 2 seconds. I leave. Not a big deal. It's the guy's walking towards the car. He doesn't have anything. We're fine. We're fine. I'm like, huh? Air went really still. Shit, Shane! And I look over at Shane, and Shane's clung, fully, just like this. And I'm like, oh no.
Sorry, like let me put that
back in the box.
I'm sorry.
It's It's wild, man. It's wild. It's wild stuff. Yeah.
Some people are like, but why the fangs though? Like, why do you get fake fangs? And I'm like, for me, I got them as plausible deniability because enough people would like when you do that face and they're like, what just happened? And I'm like, oh, I just have fake fangs. It's fine. Look, I've got more in my pocket.
Don't worry about it.
Move along. It's fine. Everything's totally normal.
Voice raises a couple octaves.
Too much. And too many times. Like I'm 50. I am 50. This has been my entire life. It is just so far beyond. People are like, I do the paranormal shows, and I'm like, does anything really scare you? Like, what are you most afraid of? I'm like, honey, I am the scariest thing in the room.
That's what I do.
Like legitimately, I have to go into some of the normal hauntings, and I'm like, okay, I'm coming in. Don't run away. It's okay. I'm going to look a little scary. It's fine. I'm not here to hurt you. It's okay. And I'm saying this to the spirits.
Yeah.
Because the number of times, like early on with Paranormal State, I'd walk in and they're like, why did all the activity stop? And I'm like, sorry. Let me just mask a little bit more. They're a little intimidated. It's fine. Why? I'm like, because I can eat them.
Yeah.
And they know that. Like, I am a shark. I've just walked into this space. I could just go, ow, 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 ow. They're all energy.
Like Pac-Man. You could just Pac-Man them all. Yeah, literally, actually,
No,
like
no,
Pac-Man.
literally, like
That's ironic. Yeah, that's ironic. I wonder if that's. I wonder who. We need to look up who created Pac-Man now.
Oh God.
Maybe there's something behind there. There's a new. There's a new direction.
There's a rabbit hole for me to go down. Holy moly.
Maybe.
But also with all the paranormal stuff, I'm the fixer. I go in, and when we're all done, like if it's really bad, I go clean it out.
Wow.
And they're like, well, how do you do that? I'm like, they're all energy. I'm not literally eating a soul, but I can definitely take a chunk out of them, and they will think otherwise. Like they will be like, oh no, off they go.
Yeah. Full on shark.
What about the non-human entities? And I'm like, I've only encountered a few things that I was like, the monster in me respects the monster in you. Like you can just, we'll just go peacefully coexist. Not that I go to DEF CON 5 with everything. Like only if something has attacked children.
Wow.
Like that is really where like I will no holds barred. Like that's what's going on. I was just like, oh, I don't care. There is no conversation. You are getting out of this space, and you are going to suffer.
I want to watch that. I'm not gonna lie. I want to watch that movie. That's the movie I want to watch. That's what I want to. That's fast. It's just so fascinating.
Always on the cutting room floor. Like it was too weird. Like the face. Like because that stuff like that exists. Somebody filmed it, and they were just like, "What did you just do?" Like also all of our batteries just died.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm just a sweet little person from the Midwest. Don't mind me.
Like the time I blew up an AC unit.
Oh, okay.
Oh my
like
God.
Stuff like the power going out, like the things where it's like, okay, the first time it's probably not me. The fifth time you're just like,
you're like, yeah, it's like,
can we get hardcover signed versions?
Ooh.
I know that Abry really wants to come up with a hardcover version. And okay, so I had meant to talk about this. So this is a revised second edition, but it is not like a fully redone, like anniversary edition. Like my Dictionary of Demons, I went to town on. And like there is a 10th anniversary edition that has got like 1,700 more names. Like it's ridiculous. And apologies to my wife because I wrote a lot of that on our vacation. And next year is the 30th anniversary if we count this as like the first thing. So I don't want to rewrite the codex as it exists. I think it needs to stand as it is with the updates that we've done this year. And I think I want to write a companion piece and do a 2-volume set.
Ooh.
Because the other thing is there's a lot of stuff that got left out. This version, so like I am the one who wrote this, but I made a point. I am keenly aware my perspective is only my perspective. I also have a whole group, House Keperu. I'm priest, but there are folks who are counselor, there are folks who are warrior, and I can speak from the perspective of what I've observed, how I think that works, but it was important to have their input. And as a group, there were some things that were in here that they were like, I think it's a little too like I'm not comfortable. So there were some things that got cut out because we were like, one of them, actually, this is an important one. This would go into a companion piece. You've got priest, warrior, and counselor, and in this codex, it's like you are one of these three. And there's not a lot of nuance for that. In practice, most people have a leaning. Like, say you're mainly priest, like that's what really resonates with you, but you're like, but there's some qualities over here that like kind of seem like how I function. I'm a priest with a warrior leaning. I don't know if you, that, yeah, but basically like there's also another thing that you're good at. It's not like I don't know, it's not like biological essentialism. These are overlays. These are pathways in which your energy is preferentially moved, but you can also learn other ways to do. So allowing for that nuance, that book would bring those things to the fore. There's also been a lot of development and discussion and dialogue in the past 30 years. So things that would enlarge upon it. And I'm still playing around with, do I bite the bullet and put in what was part 2? Which I think I read a very small piece of to you. And like that deeper, like, okay, here's why I use priest, warrior, counselor, which if you read the very, very old stuff, counselor was originally concubine. That was not only the word that I'd hit on, that was when I founded House Keperu in 96. There was myself, and it was a triumvirate of us. And so the person who was the counselor in that triumvirate preferred concubine, because sort of like the sacred concubine, that like that was how they embodied that, and that was how they empowered themselves. And it was a very vampirism manifested through sexuality, ecstasy, and intimacy were a very significant part of how they were. Some folks might otherwise want to call them an incubus or a succubus. And there is a subset in the vampire community where like that's more of how they present themselves. It gets kind of downplayed because not everybody wants to like get into the kind of sticky conversation about like, is it kink, is it vampirism, is it whatever? But you know, the answer is yes.
Shit is screaming.
So my job between now and then is I want to write a companion piece that is just all the extra stuff that allows the original to be intact, but also says, and in addition, here are these other things. Here are these.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm biased, but yes.
Yeah. Well, and Hyper has been, we're an initiatories tradition. We're technically a closed system for a couple of reasons, not for like, we're trying to be super secret or anything, but actually about the past life stuff. Yeah. Because we didn't want to just like chuck it out on the internet for this reason. It means so much more if somebody's like, hey, I have these memories. This is what I think. And we know there's no way, like they have not run across it. It's not where they could have seen it. Sometimes I have to remind myself because what they come at us with is so accurate and like so clearly tied in with stuff that I have to be like, wait, is that, nope. And that's not in the, okay, well, yeah. And if somebody is like, hey, this is what I remember, I will 100% be like, yeah. And here's this signed and dated thing from like 2004 that, yeah, that's a thing. Here's this one from 96. You weren't born yet. Yep. Well, that doesn't matter.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So that's what I want to do. And my vision for that is I have a deluxe set that is like a slip-cased hardback thing that people can get. And I don't know if we want to like try to Kickstarter that or whatever. Because I mean, print on demand is so freeing.
Yeah.
So many, like we can just be like, it is designed. This is how much it costs. If you want it, buy it. Cool. The end. It's not like, God, when I was first trying to get this book published, first of all, the hoops that I had to jump through just to get it published with Wiser were ridiculous. But I did look into self-publishing. But back in that day, it wasn't like you had print on demand. Like you had to buy and pay for usually a minimum of 1,000 books. Oftentimes 2,000 or 3,000 books, and somehow in your little like freaking, in my case, gas station job as an attendant that I'm doing in between writing, in your apartment, figure out where you're gonna put all of that. Never mind getting like the several $1,000s to pay for it up front. Like it was just not really functional.
Interesting. I can say just from what I'm seeing in the chat that a Kickstarter, people would back a Kickstarter in an instant. They really would. It just depends on how you would want to go about it. But I think you should. I mean, like, I'm just being all cards on the table. I think it's fascinating. I think that it can help a lot of people as volume. Well, we can call it volume 1 now. Volume 1 does. And I think that I think there's just so much. I think it's I think it's something that should be done. Only if you want to, though.
I mean, me being me, like that additional thing, that would exist at the very least, like a softback. Like that's easy.
I think that's a great idea.
I've been doing a lot of archival work. So like there's the Kiprian there's a ritual archives that I came out with, I think earlier this year. It's all runs together because it's been a long year. But the ritual archives is honestly was stuff that had previously been behind the wall with housekeepers. So it's not just like these are our initiatory rituals. These are how they developed. Here's transcripts of the meetings we had as we were debating, like, how does this come together? So you can get kind of like how the sausage is made and like the theory behind our ritual structure and like why these things got put together. There is a long-standing myth in the vampire community, and I am partially to blame for it, which is I used to write rituals and just sort of put them up online and various things that were played. And one of them was a rite of transformation, where you could, it was a death and rebirth. There was a lot of energetic work that went with it. And it was this is a person who is a latent vampire who's like on the verge of awakening, and they go through this experience where somebody takes energy from them and an exchange happens so that they get a sense of like what that feels like. And in some ways it's like a vampire Reiki attunement, because if you do Reiki to someone, that's like your first level attunement. You now know what it feels like. But that whole thing was ritualized to build on and capitalize on the archetypal vampire story of being brought across by someone.
Yeah.
Unapologetically used all of that. Well, that little puppy just went, I published, I forget. I think I published that under Alexander Lemeru. I had like 5 AOL accounts, like you do. And like that thing just like did the rounds. It's like the Vampire Codex. That has probably been one of the most pirated books on the planet. Like I just gave up. It's everywhere. It's been translated unofficially into at least 8 languages. And like sometimes people would be kind enough to like send me a copy, but it's one of those books that like it was so important. People would just be like, I can't afford this. Yoink. Oh, we're coming.
Oh,
probably need to be. We will just keep talking.
Yeah, no,
knows. Any last thoughts?
Ooh, last thoughts.
I want to plot. So you have been doing some fun things, showing your audience that a vampire can feed off of you directly, and you can use touch as a focus. You could use sex as a focus. You can do it from across the room, but also this is just as functional a way of connecting to people. Energy defies location. As long as you have the wherewithal to focus, you can do it.
Exactly.
So I think I would love to propose playing with something where we sync up and either tag team the audience.
Ooh, we can try.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of interesting techniques to just like cycle energy between vampires. It's not functional for feeding, but it is really useful for syncing up so you can do magic together. So you can use whatever your source of energy is. You get in sync with one another, lock step, and then pull to go do a thing.
Ooh, okay.
And I think the coolest thing that I've experienced from that was our hearts would match rhythm, including like little tachycardia moments, not just in one case, but multiple times working with people like that. Like this whole body sync up would happen too, which is easier to figure out in person. But I would be fascinated if other people could feel it.
That's wild to think about.
What we'll get to feel. So I want to put that little seed in your head, and fully, if you are down for it, full consent, we would let people know that like you're in for a wild ride. We're not sure what everybody will feel, but we would love to hear.
Ooh, that'd be so. Yeah. That's super. I've never done anything like that before.
I've done a lot of long distance ritual and energy work. I haven't done this particular technique over a distance, so I don't know quite what to expect from it. And I'm
curious. I'm very, very, very curious. I'm down.
Yeah. So at some future point, let us think about doing that.
I think they're down. I think Uh-oh. That's my guess. I see screaming in the chat right now. Screaming. Consent! I'm consenting to this! Absolutely. Oh my lord, please. I'm beyond down. Yes.
Fun times to look forward to. So to finish, the Psychic Vampire Codex is out on September 19th. You can put in pre-orders now. It is a formative text of the vampire community, and if you are an energy worker, an otherkin, or anybody else who is awakening to a different level of magical reality, you will find things that are useful for you in here. It is written to and from a vampire perspective. It was the very first book of its kind to write about vampirism by a vampire. So like this is one of the original Own Voices books. And also there's a lot you can learn. Dream walking, manifestation, the beacon, how to connect along subtle links, how to handle emotional feedback loops, what nerve burn is, tons and tons of different things that are in the language at this point that's all started there.
Yes. And I will add on to that. In my opinion, someone that has read it and will read it again and is obviously supporting this version as well. In my opinion, the single most important book, hands down, in my opinion, on the subject. It is. It entirely changed my life and my view of this. And once again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for creating something that speaks to so many of us and that so many of us need and need it. So thank you. And yeah, guys, please go and pre-order. Please go and buy. Spread it around. Put it up on Instagram. Put it up on TikTok. Shout it out. Send it to your friends. Buy 8 copies. Go. The Psychic Vampire Codex. Come on.
Okay, and don't forget, Jack has a book coming out, and you want it. Fame has its price.
Ooh. Yes, guys, please pre-order my book because it's my debut novel, and I worked really, really hard on it. And yes, it is fiction, but it's interesting because it is kind of a twisted take on fact. It's very interesting, and I want to talk about that more eventually down the road.
Yeah,
it's pretty curious.
The stories we tell always reflect ourselves.
Yeah.
All right, so we will let our poor captive audience of moderators go because they probably have to pee at this point, and I apologize.
No, make them pee their pants. No. Okay.